gathered and had a lot of fun, but during the day, quarry workers were down in the quarries.
Yeah, so it wasn't easy work. The quarrying of slate did not take off until the Welsh ended up coming here, and the quarry started as shallow surface pits where the slate protruded from the ground. And after they exhausted that, they would end up digging into the earth to the large slabs of rock. So horses or mules hoisted the slabs using a derrick, and then it dropped on a large cannonball or river stone, shattering it into smaller pieces.
I like to picture that, like them lifting it up and just like letting it drop and just smashing.
I know, it seems really rudimentary, but it's clearly it's working.
And you can see in this picture in the background, like just how neat it was.
Right, and there were a total of 12 operating quarries, and they had about a total of, how many did we say, 25 employees each?
Yeah, about 200 to 400 total.
Total, but you know, on each quarry it would be a smaller amount of men.
Yeah. So let's talk about what a typical day looked like for them. They would work 8 to 12 hours depending on the season. Their work started at sunrise with a whistle. This was like, hey, it's peacetime, like come on down and start working. The Welsh custom of morning break then happened mid-afternoon. They rested for about 10 minutes. They would stop and eat a boiled egg, a sandwich, and always hot tea, then back to work. My recent break has been cottage cheese. Random, but like it's at that protein and it just tastes good. So that's been my like mid-morning break.
You're healthy, so it makes sense.
They get about half an hour for lunch, and in that lunch they'd have another sandwich, some fruit, more tea, relatively healthy lives, so that's good. Then at sunset, the whistle blew again. It was the end of the day, and the legend says that the book, I love this, in the river in the ridge. Down the river they came, heading in all directions to their homes. The Welshmen could often be heard singing Welsh hymns or even Yankee Doodle.
Oh, true Americans now,
like
singing
right
Yankee Doodle.
Like imagine these guys like 150 years ago walking down, like it's the same like plot of land.
It is,
you know?
You're right.
Children as young as 10 could work in these quarries, and here's a picture of 2 different kids. They would have been bell ringers or water boys.
So quarry owners usually spoke English, but the Welsh was only spoken in quarry. So Welsh and English have very few common words, so that meant that the workers had privacy from their employers. So on the way down here, Jamie and I were discussing what we thought their conversations were probably about, that they wanted privacy. I was thinking that maybe, you know, there's just some things you don't want your boss to know. So it's always good to be
Not me, boss, if you're watching this. I'm always 100% truthful all the time. Why'd you just laugh? I don't know. But it would have been interesting that they maintain that language as a part of their privacy and their self-preservation. Yeah. So now let's get into one of the coolest jobs, which were the slate splitters. So these were known as the kings of the quarries. But this is before they had saw tables. They would have drilled the holes by hand, perpendicular to the cleavage or the splitting plane. Again, throwback to like a term you learned in middle school, and you're like trying not to laugh, right?
Yeah, I'm sure there's an immature boy watching right now that's like, oh, she said cleavage.
It actually is a scientific term, the splitting edge. What they do is, you can see in this picture here, they would pound wedges, adding pressure until the rock split. So their goal was to get 3/16 of an inch thick.
Wow.
So when you think of like slate, right, about 3/16 of an inch thick. And I thought this was an interesting fact. They had to maintain this like internal moisture, which they would call sap, or else if it wasn't wet, it wouldn't split.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yep. And these were the highest paid employees of the quarries. They got paid $1.50 to about $2, which is twice the amount that others made. And side note, these guys were known as quarrymen. They were not miners, and that is because a miner has to go underground and dig deep, whereas a quarry is more that you like just take out the land as you go. I asked my husband, I was like, do you know the difference between a mine and quarry? And he did. And I'm like secretly proud of him, but also like, why are you so smart?
There's probably a quarryman watching right now that's really happy that you used the right terminology. Yeah, so while peach bottom slate was the best in the world, it was also more difficult to quarry compared to the other parts of the United States. And that was due to the almost vertical cleavage. That also meant accidents were more common. And there are many stories, but we're going to just tell you about one tonight. So around dinner, the quarrymen of the Peach Bottom Slate Manufacturing Company fired a blast, and they thought all the drill holes were explosives were blown out, but unfortunately they were wrong.
Yeah. So the 2 men that were drilling were thrown into the air, and there were 2 other men that were standing nearby that were pelted with stones, and of course they were injured. But there was another man, and his name was Thomas Williams. He had his back to the explosion, and one of the rocks was launched into the back of his head, and it hit the base of his neck. And when that happened, he died, which is a huge shame.
It is.
So it hit the bottom of his skull, and so he was killed instantly.
Yeah.
Williams was a Welsh immigrant, and he lived in the vicinity for, at that point, 34 years.
Wow.
And isn't that such a York thing to say? Like, you lived here for 34 years, but you're still an immigrant,
Yeah,
right?
I know.
Well, the idea of like, where are you from, you know? But he was, of course, welcomed because a lot of his countrymen came here. But he was known as the best rockman here, and his death shook the community.
Oh, God bless him. So now we're going to talk about the decline of the slate industry. So the industry endured normal ups and downs throughout the years, but the Great Depression landed the death blow. They found themselves competing with cheaper alternatives like asphalt shingles and corrugated steel, and many companies held on, one until the 1950s and the other until the 70s, selling byproducts of the slate like fine slate dust for paint and cosmetics.
It's really interesting, yeah. Even before the quarries failed later, they were running into problems around in the turn of the century. Some quarries had reached depths of 200 feet, which meant that now you're getting into the water tables. So water submerged the rock faster than they could pump it out.
Right.
I also thought this was interesting. When they were quarrying, they didn't think too far ahead, because when the rock was lifted out, they just set it on the edge, and there's only like so much that you can do. So it accumulated, and this led to disastrous rock slides, which again threaten the lives of the workers.
Yeah, very dangerous work.
Yep.